Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Zaki.
Really important as much as possible, like to really stop and reflect and give yourself credit for how far you've come, you know? Because I think it's really easy to just be focused on like what's next, or like you reach a big goal and then like somebody told me this about me. They were like, you know, you just reached this big goal that like you wanted for the last 2.5, 3 years, and you're already just focused on what's next.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. On this week's episode, we have portrait photographer Aaron J. Young. Please enjoy this episode. Aaron J. Young, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So Aaron, I'm just curious, just for listeners and everything, I always start out with kind of where you from, born and raised, and kind of give us a little background on who you are.
Sure. So I was born and raised in central Pennsylvania, a very small town, surrounded by fields, Amish people, you know, like that sort of very small town mentality. And yeah, so I grew up there. I lived there until I was about 21, 22. And that's whenever I moved to Los Angeles. And then, yeah, I've been in LA ever since, but now, I mean, I'm currently in Palm Springs, so I'm kind of splitting time right now between Palm Springs and LA. But I still, my main studio is still in Los Angeles. So I've been there for about 13 years now.
Amazing. What made you pick LA? I mean, obviously industry and everything is here, but just kind of curious why specifically Los Angeles for you?
So I remember at the time, the two places in question were like New York or Los Angeles. And I had been to LA, twice, I think. Yeah, I had been to LA twice. I'd been to Palm Springs once. And honestly, it was like the weather here, the vibe here was so different from where I grew up. In New York, you know, is also very different from where I grew up, but it's not too far away. And, you know, I grew up with like the really cold winters and, you know, the car accidents when you like hit the black ice and all of that stuff. And I was like, I just want like something different. Like I don't miss the cold weather at all. You know, I mean, it's like, it can be Thanksgiving Day and it can be like 75 degrees here, you know. So, right. You know, it was really more of the vibe that it just felt, intuitively, it felt like I belonged here. So that's kind of what I went with.
Amazing. And, so just kind of some background and stuff. Obviously you're a portrait photographer. Your portraits are amazing. Everyone, please go check them out. But kind of what is your background in photography? Are you self-taught? Did you go to school for it?
I'm pretty much self-taught. I kind of just got the idea that I wanted to do photography. I mean, I grew up, being creative always, you know, like when I was really young, I was really obsessed with drawing and then obsessed with music. And then photography came along after sort of a few years of, I guess, kind of getting away from the creativity a little bit. Yeah, I just, you know, became obsessed with it like I do with many things in my life that I'm passionate about. And, yeah, and then I just started teaching myself. You know, luckily you can learn a lot on YouTube. And, so that was super helpful. The first sort of like paid gig that I got was just photographing some, gay clubs around Los Angeles, like for specific nights, you know, like, I was working with somebody who was already doing that. So he'd, you know, call me up and say like, hey, can you show up to this club tonight? And it would be like, you know, showing up from like midnight to 2 or something, and could photograph whatever I wanted. It was basically like just capturing the night. And then those photos would sometimes end up in like, you know, the little like nightlife magazines or whatever around town.
Right.
So I did that. And then from there, I ended up working on RuPaul's Drag Race. As a stills photographer. So that was like the first like big thing that I got. And I did that for 3.5 years, but that was only like, you know, I was shooting for like a month out of the year. So, you know, it was just a small chunk of time. And then, you know, so along the way, I just kind of like continued to teach myself. It wasn't until maybe 4 years ago that I took like a photography workshop. And that was the first time that I did any sort of like formal, you know, training or anything that could be considered like that. You know, and I've also in the last like 6-7 years, found a lot of like educational resources that were really helpful in how do you have a successful business, how much to charge, you know, how to work on your own self-value and, your like sort of blocks and resistance around like asking for money for something that you do, and all of, you know, all of those things, which hugely helpful in just having a successful business.
Yeah. No, I think you touch on something that as artists in general, it's really hard to know what that is because unfortunately I feel like in the photo industry, people aren't really willing to share those things. So it's amazing that you found a resource to be able to do it. And I know all too well the nightlife in West Hollywood, and I used to do the same thing, shooting events and stuff. It's funny. I was going through an archive and I was like, oh my God, like, and some of the people that I had no clue who they were, now I recognize who they are in those photos, and it made me laugh. Yep. I was kind of like, wow. How times have changed. Still people around though, which is good.
Right.
So I'm curious kind of, how do you go from something like RuPaul's Drag Race and then really kind of, like you said, you took a class and everything and learned more, kind of structured photography, but your style is so specifically, beautiful studio type portraits. And when I say studio portraits, I mean, not only in the studio, but studio lighting and kind of using the balance of natural light and, strobe. So kind of what kind of gave you the vision to create that style and aesthetic of your own?
Well, so when I was working on Drag Race, you know, like when I first just picked up a camera, I was just photographing anything and everything. And then, you know, working in the nightclubs was photographing people, then working on Drag Race was photographing people again. And it was over that course of time that I also started going to therapy for the first time, started like on my own journey of self-work and self-discovery, and became really passionate about psychology and spirituality. You know, that's also dealing with the self, but also like people. And so I kind of just like over a few years, like honed in on photographing people as the thing that I was most passionate about. Okay. And yeah, that's kind of, you know, it just sort of happened. I didn't really set out to like just photograph people, but you know, it kind of just, it kind of went in that direction.
Nice. No, I mean, I think it's beautiful. I was reading your artist statement on your website. And you talk about, it says, my work is my passion. It is a culmination of all my life experiences, the pain, this trauma, the work I've done to find forgiveness, love, and compassion. So, you know, this podcast is really talking about using kind of struggle or pain and trauma and everything, and how as artists, we kind of transform that, into kind of like this beautiful thing, right? So if you could share as much as you want or as little as you want, of kind of some of the struggles you've had to personally go through that you felt have really kind of helped you to become a better portrait photographer, a better, you know, artist, if you were.
Yeah. I mean, now the way that I look at it is that I feel like all of the struggles I've been through have all helped get me to this point. All of the pain and difficulty that I've experienced in my life, have been huge, what do you call it? Like huge moments where that's when I did the most work on myself, or whenever I would, you know, just discover something new to try in terms of like how to integrate and to heal. And I think all of those experiences, when you really show up and do the work, help to, at least for me, they've helped me to develop, I think, a much deeper sense of compassion and empathy that I use in my work, because my work is really all about creating a space where people really feel seen and heard and feel safe to really be themselves. You know, because most people don't like having their photograph taken. So then becomes a question of like, how do you take a photograph of somebody, or, you know, anybody that's going to step in front of the camera? How do you connect with them quickly and then capture something that feels very authentic, very much like who they are? So I think that my pain has helped me to get more in touch with myself, and in turn, like the human experience, you know, like the universal experience of going through shit and, going through trauma, going through all the difficult things. And, so I feel like that's helped me when I'm sitting across from somebody to sense into them and to sense into their pain, to sense into their, whatever they have going on. And, you just to create that space of, somebody feeling seen, feeling heard. And, I grew up with an incredible amount of shame, self-loathing, being gay, growing up in a very religious household,
Got it.
hating myself, for being gay, I had just like a really terrible idea of who I was, I just thought that I was a piece of shit and that that I didn't deserve to be happy. I didn't deserve to have good things. I didn't deserve, and, obviously if that's what you believe, then that's what your life reflects.
Right.
So then if you're going to be like an artist and you're going to be a successful artist, then you better do the work to get out of your own way, or to just develop a sense of compassion and love for yourself, and value for yourself, so that you're not walking around, feeling undeserving. Because then it's like, how are you going to charge something that's going to allow you to be successful? Like, how are you going to really approach your business in any way that's going to allow for you to be successful at it?
Right.
And believe that you have something to offer the world, So, when I moved to LA, I was like 21, 22. And when I got here, I was young and I didn't really think that much about it, I guess, looking back. Like, it's such a big thing to like move across the country one day. And like,
yeah,
I didn't think about it in terms of being as big of a deal as it really was. So, which allowed me to really make the move. And then it was once I got here that I freaked out. And then I immediately thought I had made the wrong decision. Like, what am I thinking? Who do I think I am? Like, I need to go right back to Pennsylvania. And luckily I had some good friends, a couple of good friends who sort of talked me into staying. They were like, just stay for 3 months and just see how you feel then.
Right.
So I did. And there was a lot of depression and, just a lot of fear that came up. I remember just being scared to do everything. Like, I was scared to go to the grocery store because I was scared I was going to get lost on the way there. And then just little things. But like, I lived a very sheltered childhood. So it's understandable now, like, to me, like, why I was so scared to be out in the world like that and to be so far away from where I grew up. But so that difficulty is what then opened the door to starting to go to therapy, to doing other kinds of things in that realm. And then discovering that not only did I like therapy, but that I had a huge passion for psychology. And so, when I'm passionate about something, it's easy for me to learn. It's easy for me to just soak it all up. So I just like became obsessed with that. And, that's like a never ending journey, obviously, and it takes however long it takes. And I don't think it ever ends. But that is really where I started to heal and to really take a look at my past and, started growing in a way. And that's also when I started to like want to be a professional photographer as well.
Right.
And it took, quite a few years because it kind of coincided with like the personal work I was doing, to be able to get to a place where I was like, okay, I want to be successful at this, and just believing that first I was capable. And then, which also it's like, even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking like, believing I was capable. It sounds like it's this black and white thing of like, you arrive at this place where it's like, all of a sudden you believe that you're capable. And then like but that's not how life works. It's like not black and white, it's like, sometimes I believe that I'm capable, and sometimes even now it's like I recognize that I get freaked out or anxious, and it's because I'm doubting that I'm capable of doing whatever's in front of me. So it's not like this black and white thing. It's like just developing the ability to recognize what it is, to have compassion for yourself, to and through the process of showing up for things that scare me. And up to this point, there's so many different things in my career that I've chosen to say yes to or to show up to that I fully didn't feel capable of at the moment. But I was like, I want to do it anyways. I'm going to like face this fear. And then it's like through that process, you build like a little bit more confidence and a little bit more, faith in yourself. And then over time it does, like, that stuff does lessen, but it can still show up and it can still, feel debilitating at times.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of, you're also really well known for your self-portraits, which are such artistic and beautiful portraits of yourself that are, not the traditional, straight on kind of self-portrait of, I'd say like Richard Avedon or someone like that. But kind of, your process as you're talking about, like going through therapy and kind of expressing yourself and figuring yourself out and, going through the work, if you will, in the journey of kind of, becoming an adult, if you will. How and when did you kind of start to feel comfortable enough to be able to capture yourself in front of the camera? Because as you said, not everyone's usually comfortable having their portrait taken. So did you feel some sense of kind of relief or the ability to express yourself best in that way through these self-portraits?
I think it really started because I just was, playing around with light and just really learning photography. And so at times it was just easier to photograph myself. But then I quickly realized that it was sort of a form of therapy. And it's just, like many art forms, like musicians will write lyrics and write music to kind of express what they're going through or to process through things. And it's just like that. It's like, it's an avenue or like a way of self-expression that I feel is difficult for me to do, in other ways, or I feel like I struggle with, I guess, expressing myself that vulnerably, let's say like in a group of people. But if I'm, just in front of the camera by myself, I feel like I can go there in a way that, and then express myself in a much more vulnerable, sometimes intimate or whatever way.
Right.
And it's, when you're in front of the camera and you're photographing yourself, it's confronting because you're seeing yourself in ways you've never seen yourself before. You take lots of bad photos of yourself. You see like all the angles and like all of the things that you don't like about yourself. And it kind of, for me, it's kind of helped me to accept myself on a deeper level because I just gotten so much more used to the things that at one time I didn't like. It's like, well, you just keep seeing them over and over. And it's like, well, this is just who I am, and you can't really,
right.
like, and I feel a deeper sense of acceptance of myself through that process.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's also been helpful, like if I'm going through something like a breakup or, something difficult in my life, to be able to express the pain and turn it into art. It's a way to take something that hurts, that oftentimes or sometimes in the moment when something's really painful, it's like, I like to believe that everything has a meaning and there's a reason and everything, but this gives it a meaning and you can do it quickly. It's like a way of taking something that is traumatic or painful and then turning it into something beautiful. And in that process, it feels like it gives it a new meaning and purpose, and, that in and of itself, I feel like is sort of therapeutic.
Absolutely. I love that. So I'm curious, kind of, what do you consider to be maybe one of your greatest achievements, and maybe something that others might not know about, but you consider to be like a personal achievement that you've accomplished?
I would say the greatest achievement is just being able to be creative and do something that I love successfully for a living. Because I know that there are lots of artists, lots of photographers, lots of people who struggle to be able to, build a life around doing the thing that they love. And I'm incredibly grateful that I have been able to do that. And, like the 8-year-old version of me, is like so excited that I get to, that this is my life, like at that age, this is all I would have wanted to do, is just be doing something that I love, something I'm passionate about, living what I feel is my purpose and making money at it, and, so I feel like that's my greatest achievement career wise. Yeah. There's just, I don't know if there's like one other a specific achievement. I feel like there's just things that happen along the way that feel like big achievements, sometimes it's just a big job that I get that, I reflect on how, maybe a year ago, I would have been terrified to even say yes to the opportunity and felt completely incapable. And now I feel confident that I can show up for the experience and do it successfully. And that's a really cool, like, part of the process of just, showing up every day and doing the work. So I've had, like, many of those moments where, just a certain project will come along it's just really cool to just that I'm even getting to do it,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there's like multiple memes that are going around, but it's kind of like, think of yourself like even a year ago, like you said, and how you probably want to be where you're at right now, even a year ago or 5 years or however long that may be. Right. And thinking that, how fortunate you are, to be able to do what you're doing and like how far you've come. And sometimes if we don't reflect or, like you're talking about going through therapy or kind of talking it through, you forget like, oh, I may be feeling shitty right now, but like, look what I've accomplished, look what I'm doing and get to do.
Yeah.
So
I think that it's really important. And as I say this, it's like, I sometimes forget to do this too, but like, it's really important as much as possible, like to really stop and reflect and give yourself credit for how far you've come,
Yeah.
Because I think it's really easy to just be focused on like what's next, or like you reach a big goal and then, like somebody told me this about me. They were like, you just reached this big goal that like you wanted for the last 2.5, 3 years, and you're already just focused on what's next. And it's like, what about the fact that you actually reached the goal and you're actually doing the thing that 2 years ago when you wrote it down for the first time, like you had no clue how it was even going to happen.
Right.
And here you are accomplishing it. It's stuff like that. And it's so easy to just not be present and, just be focused on the future and like, or be like, you get a big job. It's like more money than you've ever made before on a single job, and be like, sweet. And then the next day you're like, okay, well, am I going to be able to pay the rent next month? And it's like,
that's real.
Yeah. I'm in that right now. Like I've been recognizing where, I'm just going through other life stuff that's kicking up some fear and stuff. And so it's like the side effect of that is, having a little bit of fear around money and fear around like business stuff. And it's like, it doesn't matter that I had a huge, financial thing happen yesterday. It's like today I caught myself going like, okay, that's great. It's like almost wanting to discount the wins and as like, well, they don't really count. They don't really matter. Like, and that's something that I am really working to shift in my perspective, is to not discount the good stuff, because I know that's just trained, that's just like a learned behavior. And, more and more, I would say I'm shifting into that place of being able to appreciate the good stuff and, and even expect good stuff, because there's, oftentimes we expect like the worst case scenario to happen, but like it is possible to literally just shift your perspective into expecting good things to happen,
Right.
Because it really comes down to like, do I believe I deserve good things or not? Or do I believe that I'm capable or not? It's the really basic, not basic, but the really like core, beliefs about ourselves that we have, that I think then all this other stuff stems from.
Right. So to kind of flip that on its head, what do you consider to be kind of your greatest weakness? And then how do you really kind of overcome that, when it comes to like staying ahead of it, if you will, if you recognize it?
Biggest weakness. So one thing I recognize over the last couple of years that shows up very regularly and very easily and quickly is feeling a sense of overwhelm. Like I can start my day off feeling pretty good, and then, have like a list of a couple of things to do. And then before I know it, it's like, I'm not just thinking about that. I'm thinking about like things are getting piled onto the list. And then before I know it, I'm like just feeling completely incapable of doing my life. And it can happen within a matter of a couple of minutes. And I know that's from how I grew up, and I know that that is how I was raised and all that stuff. I've always dealt with a pretty high level of anxiety too, if when that starts to happen, I start to get really anxious, and it's like, okay, like, and then that space that I'm in then works against itself, because then it feels even harder to take action. So now it's like I'm feeling overwhelmed and not wanting to even take any action to counteract the fact that I feel overwhelmed. So I would say that's probably, and the beliefs that go along with that are, I'm incapable of doing, my life. I'm not smart enough. I'm not creative enough, like really just core kind of things. So, I mean, I think a big part of it is becoming aware, becoming clear on like, okay, what are you actually telling yourself? Like what are the beliefs that are actually coming up? Because you can get so easily just carried away with the sense of overwhelm and not really stop and be like, okay, what am I actually telling myself? Like, what do I actually believe about myself that's leading to feeling overwhelmed and the anxiety?
Right.
So I've done a lot of work on those things in therapy. I'll try just about anything just to see, if it resonates. So, things that have worked really well are like EMDR therapy. I would suggest everybody like research that and check it out, because it's really powerful. EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique, where you're just literally like tapping on meridians on the body while you're going through like the negative beliefs. And there's been hundreds and hundreds of studies now that prove that you're actually activating your body's calming system and activating a different part of your brain. And so you can actually like calm down and neutralize the feeling or process through what you're going through. So, I like having tools that I can actually pull from when I'm feeling a certain way. Recently, I would say within the last 2 months, I found a hypnotherapist, and life-changing, it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but also a little nervous. And first couple of sessions, all we focused on was anxiety. And I got to say, I think that it's had a life-changing impact. I mean, I'm the calmest consistently now for about a month and a half that I've ever been in my life. And there's like big things happening that normally would be anxiety inducing, and they're not inducing that much anxiety. And, so that's been hugely helpful. And also just like developing, conscious, different conversation to have with yourself. Like if I realize now that, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm, my whole life feels like it's going to be over by the end of the day, I can recognize that. And then I can consciously have a conversation with myself. Sometimes it's out loud, and I'll be like, that's not true. Like the facts are that like I'm fully capable of having the life that I have. I've always been able to take care of myself. I've always been provided for. I'm not alone. I have a great support system. There's no evidence that suggests that that's going to stop, or that I'm going to fall flat on my face. So it's like just consciously choosing to have a different conversation with myself now is very helpful.
And for you, is it kind of recognizing that in the moment when you start to get overwhelmed or stressed and stuff, that you are able to like do the tapping as well as kind of recognize those things and kind of work it out?
Yes. And that's something that I think that's just, it takes time to develop, because if you're like, for me, I think a lot of the stuff I struggle with, it's habitual at this point, like I just developed the habit of freaking out about stuff. So, and habits can be hard to break, but they also can be easy to break. I mean, there is no proof that like, if it can take, this is at least what I believe, if it can take 1 second to completely traumatize yourself, then because of, something outside of your control that might happen, like a car accident or a sexual assault. There's just big things that happen to people where it's like it was out of your control and you can be traumatized in an instant. I really believe that we're also capable of healing in an instant too.
Absolutely.
And all of these modalities like the EFT tapping, the EMDR, hypnotherapy, they're really all different ways of sort of tapping more deeply into your subconscious, where all this stuff is really, hanging out and all the stuff that is really why we're making the choices we make every day. So that seems to be the thing that I've found to be the most helpful. Is like what things can kind of like go beyond the conscious into the subconscious and help you to really change the patterns or integrate the things that we're not even aware of that we're kind of hanging on to.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. I love that. So I'm curious, do you kind of have, I know that you mentioned in, growing up in a kind of a religious household and everything, and then, kind of going through that process of doing your own thing. Do you consider yourself to be spiritual? Do you have a faith that you kind of believe in, or something that has kind of like also helped you to grow? Or, are you an atheist and say, let it all go?
No. So I was raised Christian. I would say pretty strict version of Christianity. I now consider myself a spiritual person. I believe that there is definitely a life force and I'm comfortable calling it God. I mean, I don't think that there is this energy and this life force that kind of runs through everything, that runs through us, that's sort of, just something bigger than ourselves that's kind of like guiding. And, I look at creative energy as, a connection to that, divine inspiration or just creative ideas. I kind of view it as like, there's all these like, ideas and things that are like floating around in the universe, and they kind of float by and they want to attach to somebody, and, you grab onto it. And that's like, to me, that's what divine inspiration is, or just creativity. But it's like, where does that come from? I believe that it comes from this source creative energy, that we're connected to, that, I feel like we live in a society that's really moving in the direction of disconnecting from that, like with, like it being addicted to social media and all of the ways that we cope with our pain, and distract from our pain. I feel like actually, then cut us off from that divine inspiration and cut us off from those things floating by that we would normally maybe, grab onto and be able to utilize.
Right.
So, so I consider myself to be spiritual for sure.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'm Buddhist. Just put that out there. And so this podcast really kind of got born out of this idea that, there's a word called renge, which is Japanese for kind of lotus flower. And so the lotus is actually an incredible flower, if you will, because, it has the simultaneity of both blooming and seeding at the same time. But like the beauty of the blossom of this flower isn't created unless like the muck and like shit, for lack of a better word, underneath it is actually kind of like giving it that fuel. So that's kind of the concept of this podcast is like, right, creatives use like the struggle or the shit underneath to be able to like grow this beautiful flower on the top, or kind of what the world sees. So I was just kind of curious. I think that, and you kind of already mentioned it, what we were already talking about, but kind of, do you feel like you've personally had like this beautiful kind of blossoming moment of your own lotus, within your career, and, maybe a moment of that you felt like, wow, I really like made it at this moment?
Yeah. I mean, I would say actually coming out of lockdown during the pandemic, like right on the other side of lockdown, when I was able to like reopen my studio and start actually seeing clients in real life, there was like a momentum that built really fast that, was different from before. Before it was like, I was, doing photography full time, but there was an ebb and flow to it that was a little bit more drastic. Like, like really busy and then I'm not busy at all. I'm really busy and I'm not busy. And, and it was like, all of a sudden I was consistently busy, in a different way, to the point where I was having a hard time actually just like keeping up with it, because I just wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to like having that kind of a life where I had more stuff to do and more things to keep up with. So, talking to other creative friends who have, at different places in their career, they've told me, like there's a tipping point that you'll reach eventually where where the consistency will happen, where the jobs will be coming in, where the momentum will have built to a point where, it's more steady. And I feel like that point happened. So I would say that's probably the big turning point. And I think, honestly, like that coincides with all of this other stuff we're talking about, like all of the other work, the personal work. Cause a year before, the pandemic, I don't know that I really believed that I was capable of doing that much, of like being that busy, of being able to like take on that much work and all that stuff. So, I feel like when I believed that I was capable is when it started to show up into my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recognizing that. And then, yeah, exactly. In our Buddhist practice, we talk about kind of like our outer life, if you will, the surroundings around us are actually just a reflection of ourselves. Right. And so
Totally. Yep.
like you're talking about, right, is like manifesting that into your life, right, is actually through believing it yourself and then taking action to be able to like see that. So yeah. And I feel as artists in general, it is really difficult to kind of believe that you're capable of doing something that you can't physically or tangibly feel or see, in the sense of success and whatnot. So, yeah, what was it kind of like during the pandemic for you? As a portrait photographer, I know as well as a photographer, it's kind of like it was shut down for quite some time. And then kind of like you said, you came out of it and it was very busy. But during that period, were you able to still, there was people that were doing like virtual portraits and, photographing people, or did you really just kind of like hone in on your kind of interpersonal space, or what was your personal experience like?
It was scary at first because, it was like, okay, like, I don't know how I'm going to make money because I can't physically see people in real life.
Right.
That was my dog in the background. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Honestly, I was like, starting to get creative with other things because there are other ways to make money, like I can sell some prints. I can like, do other things. And then I ended up actually having this inspired idea to just start making masks and selling them. Wow. Because it was like my partner at the time, like, he also wasn't working at all because of what he does for a living. So I was like, what do you think about making masks for a living? And it was just this wild idea because neither of us have any experience in that realm, but we put together a team and we started doing it and we started selling on Amazon and it took off. And, nice. So during lockdown, we were working 8-10 hours a day doing that. Wow. And, it was very successful. And that was kind of like what we did during all of, for probably like 6 to 8 months was just selling masks on Amazon.
That's so cool. What kind of masks? I'm curious.
They were just, cause back when everything first started, they were just saying like, cover your face with anything, basically. They were like, so we found somebody who could make, like people who could actually sew the masks because we didn't have that skill. And they, they were making like cloth masks basically.
Right.
And back then, people hadn't caught up to, even if you bought them on Amazon, they would take a while to get to you and people were freaking out. And, so I think our strong point was that we had the ability to, we would ship out within 24 hours of getting an order.
Nice. I'm such a ding dong. When you first said masks, I totally thought you meant like artistic masks. Like,
no,
I'm like,
they were just literally like, they were just feeling the need of, yeah.
No, that's amazing. I'm like completely, it's so weird. We're in this like phase now post COVID, if you will, if it even is that, because obviously COVID is still very relevant and around, but, it totally like skipped my mind that you would be making masks to keep safe.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, if you look back on maybe like 21-year-old Aaron who just came to Los Angeles and now, just kind of curious, like, what do you think brought you happiness then versus now? And kind of what do you see as the biggest difference between those two kind of times in your life?
When I look back, so when I first got to LA, I would say I didn't really have that clear of an idea of what made me happy. I thought that what would make me happy was like finding somebody to be in a relationship with so that I wouldn't have to be by myself. Like, yeah, I didn't have like a real clear idea of what happiness even meant to me, I don't think. And now, how would I, like, my idea of happiness now is peace. Like, having, the older I get, the more I realize the value of having peace in my life, and making choices that promote that. It's why I'm in Palm Springs right now, because I felt at one point that my soul was just being called to this place, and the calm, there's this energy here that is like, you know, we're in this like little desert oasis, and it's surrounded completely by mountains, and it is native land, and so it's just, there is this palatable, peaceful energy I feel here, and so that's why I decided, you know, or that's when I knew I wanted to be here at least part of the time, you know, because I just wanted to go in the direction of what I felt, where I felt called the most. So it's definitely a sense of peace and doing things that I really love, you know, like just creating brings me joy. Connecting to people brings me joy. In my work, you know, I love the aspect of it that's just simply connecting to another person and drawing out of them like their humanity and their vulnerability and their authenticity. And also, I think happiness is mostly like developing the ability to be okay and to be content with myself, you know, and to not need to get it from another person. You know? I mean, also, absolutely. I would say happiness is like just having really good people in my life that, you know, are very supportive, very loving, and having that connection, you know. Also laughing, you know, just being able to like, I mean, one of my favorite things about social media is just like looking at memes. Cause it just makes me, you know, when it's like, if I find something that's really funny, it makes me laugh. And it's so important because life can be so intense and so like serious and so anxiety inducing and all of these things. And like, just to chill and to like laugh about something is so healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Oh, so to add to the last thing I was saying too, happiness, I think a huge part of happiness is living my purpose. So I would say when I was like 21, I had no clue what my purpose was. Right. And I'm really grateful that I feel discovered what that is. I don't know what it all entails. Like it could entail things that I'm not even aware of at this moment in my life. And it could go in different directions and things, but I know that I'm meant to be doing what I'm doing right now. And that brings me contentment and brings me happiness, you know?
Nice. I'm just curious. So I was taking a look at your site and I noticed that you had kind of a personal project on there called Beautiful Immigrant. And so I would love to know kind of for the audience, you know, a little bit more about it and kind of what, obviously there's an artist statement on there as well as to why, but just for the listeners and people watching, kind of what is the purpose of it and kind of what brought you to this idea of photographing these immigrants?
Yeah. So my partner at the time was a journalist, and he was actually doing a story with the Weather Channel about how, I think this was in 2017. This was when Trump was, you know, calling people in the migrant caravan the rapists and the drug people and all that stuff, and it wasn't true. And so he was doing a story about how global warming is affecting prolonged drought in Central America, and with people who, you know, are reliant on their crops as the only way for them to make any money and to eat. There are people that have no choice but to leave where they're from because they can't live there anymore. And so, so he was following a group of people as they were kind of making their way to the border. And, so the last trip that they made for that, story is when I went with them. and we were in Tijuana, right on the border with the group that had arrived there. They were kind of like there waiting to, to figure out what they were going to do next. And, I always want to use what I do to, give a voice to other people. Right. Who might not have a platform, might not have a voice, there's so much racism and, there's just racism, misogyny, there's so much animosity towards people who are different and from us, whoever, that I wanted to just go there and to capture these people in a way that would hopefully cause whoever saw the photos to see the humanity of the people and hopefully break through those barriers of judgment and racism and preconceived ideas of people that, that we don't even know, that we've never met, And, so that was kind of like the why I wanted to do it. And, so I'm grateful that, was able to actually make it happen.
Amazing. Yeah. They're beautiful portraits.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it looks like you had a gallery show for this exhibit as well.
Yeah. So, I shot that stuff in 2017, I think towards the end of the year. And then, I think it was around March in 2018 that, we did a show with everything. It was a cool space that was actually ended up being instead of, for some of it, instead of like actual walls, there was actually like this fencing that just happened, that was in the space already. And I thought that was a really powerful statement. Because, at the time there were, I ended up actually I didn't set out to do this, but I just happened to photograph a lot of children, that were part of the migrant caravan. And this was also a time when the children were being put in cages and people were being held for, really long periods of time. And so, again, it was just, it was nice to be able to do an actual show and have more people see the work.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So I'm curious, kind of, being a creative is not easy, and, having a work ethic that, kind of keeps on going. I'm curious, kind of, what is a day in the life like for Aaron, when you're in the midst of working, whether you're busy or not, kind of, how do you go through your day? I know you were sharing earlier how, things pile up and it kind of brings on anxiety and whatnot, but just kind of a day in the life, what does that look like for you?
I mean, it's different. Like some days I feel very productive. Some days I can't be productive to save my life. And, so generally speaking, I'll just say lately what I've been doing, like I get up around 6 a.m. and then I, have my sort of like little morning routine thing. Take my dog for a nice walk in the morning, which is like, just, especially here in Palm Springs, it's so beautiful. And it's like just going for a walk in the morning when the sun's coming up is like a spiritual experience, just to just take it all in and to, such a beautiful way to wake up. Then I go to the gym, and then when I get back from the gym is whenever I, start working. And, my goal is to kind of, put in like a good day of work. Well, also if it's a day that I have a photo shoot, then, I'll try to do that stuff before, I have to show up for the photo shoot, and then I'll have a photo shoot for however long that lasts, and then try to get some other work stuff done after the photo shoot to varying degrees of success. Cause usually after a photo shoot, I'm just kind of like, my brain is gone and I'm like tired and I feel depleted and, so I always tell myself I'm going to like get a bunch of stuff done after a photo shoot. And then like, usually it's just a couple of things that I accomplish. And if I don't have a photo shoot, then it's, I'm rarely 100% caught up with all the other things that, that go on behind behind the scenes. So like, and right now I had an assistant at one time. Now I don't have an assistant, but I've had a marketing team for a couple of years. So like they're in charge of, so all social media advertising, kind of stuff. And then, you know, I'll have like, I could have phone consultations on any given day. I could have Zoom calls with clients that I've already photographed to review images, editing, you know, like I outsource a good amount of work. And then there are times where I, will, just edit it myself for whatever reason. Right. So there's always that kind of stuff going on. If, you know, there's personal project stuff that is always, you know, sitting there waiting to be touched. So, you know, so it's like I might be doing that. There's emails. There's, there could just be other ideas that I get of just, you know, like whatever it is, like some creative idea that for my business or whatever that I eventually take some action on. So it's like on many of the days I'm doing that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. But I still struggle with days where I'm just like, I get back from the gym and like, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to like make shit happen. And it's like, it's just the day's dragging on and I'm just like, I'm having such a hard time focusing. And, that's been a huge area where I could definitely be more, gentle with myself. Cause it's very easy for me to be hard on myself in that and to feel like I'm not being productive enough. And that's something that I have to remind myself. Like this past Sunday, I was just hanging out with a friend in the afternoon and you know, this is somebody that, you know, we talk about all kinds of deep stuff. So I said it out loud. I was like, you know, as I'm hanging out and having a good time, I'm actually having a little bit of a hard time not being hard on myself because there's a part of me that feels like I should be doing something productive, you know, like something that falls under the umbrella of work or business. Work related. And there's this fear that if I'm not actively doing it, then like, you know, the money's not going to come in. And if the money doesn't come in, then, you know, ultimately I'm going to end up homeless, you know, living in a box or something. So it's like, it's like, that's where my brain goes to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I got to remind myself or choose to remind myself that, you know, the things that are happening and being connected to like a life force outside of myself. And, it's so much bigger than that, you know, like it's not reliant on just working my ass off, you know, like I remind myself that in a moment of just doing nothing and relaxing, having fun, doing something completely unrelated, I am still attracting into my life the things that are going to help me to achieve my goals and the things that, you know, and it's not, I don't have to just wear myself out. Like that's not going to actually get me there, you know, if I'm just exhausted all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I think that trope is very relevant. Thank you for sharing that. Cause as artists, I feel like it is this kind of, mouse wheel that you feel like you're kind of running on. And if you're not doing that, then you're like, oh, I'm lazy. And then, you kind of get down on yourself.
It's our entire culture. It's like Western culture is, you know, even if you're corporate, like so many people I know that have corporate jobs, it's like they're expected to be working constantly, working around the clock. Like, it's completely counterproductive to live that way. You know, like it actually gets in the way of creativity. It gets in the way of divine inspiration. It gets in the way of like, it gets in the way of so many things that would actually be so much more helpful to being successful. And, you know, but that's kind of the world we live in. And so, sometimes it feels like you're going against everything by, you know, choosing to just chill and to not, you know, work yourself into the ground.
Yeah, no, rest and relaxation are something that we could definitely learn to have more of and less kind of pressure on ourselves to constantly work as a society, I think in general.
Somebody told me one time, they're like, nobody's keeping score. Like nobody's watching, like when you're at home and you're trying to make something happen, it's like the only person that really cares is you. Like nobody's actually, there's no medal to win. There's no like achievement award you're going to get for having accomplished all the things on your list that day. Like nobody gives a shit. Like it's really just you doing it for yourself. And, I have to remind myself that often actually is that there's no award that I'm going to win by the end of the day or, like that's just like, that's an idea that was learned in my brain. But it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah. Untraining ourselves of thinking like that is definitely something that I know I personally am trying to do more of. Cause I'm like, oh God, I need to do more stuff or like, do a podcast episode, talk to someone, do something constantly. What's one thing, that you've learned about yourself really being in this industry as a photographer?
God, I feel like if you have your own business, it confronts like every part of who you are at some point or another,
right?
Which is a huge opportunity for growth. So, I mean, I feel like I've learned so much about myself. I mean, I've learned that I am so much more capable than I thought at one time that I was. I mean, there's so many shifts that have happened over the last few years around the way that I value what I do. I mean, starting off and being like, I don't know what to charge. Like, I think I should, and then you go Google like 50 other people's websites and you just happen to come across other people who aren't valuing what they do, but you think like, that's what I should be doing. And so then it's like, you're like, I should be charging $100 and giving, 300 images to a client. And it's like, it's not sustainable. It's not like, it's such like, that's, you can't, like, that just doesn't work. But not knowing like that there's another way to do it. And then, I've learned to really value what I do, and value what I offer to the world and to clients and the way that I view money. I grew up with a very scarcity sort of mindset around money, which is the recipe for never having any money. So, and then that gets in the way of everything. So it's everything business related. So, over the last couple of years, I've really shifted the way that I think about money and I don't stress so much about money as I used to, like I'm much more calm around it. I also just started to consciously change the value I place on money, because you can look at like $1,000 and you can be like, oh my God, that's a huge amount of money. Right. And then it's going to seem like a huge amount of money to charge. It's a huge amount of money to have in your bank account. It's a big idea. And I just kind of started viewing it as a much smaller thing, if that makes sense. So that numbers don't seem so big anymore. And then it's like, oh, okay. So then whenever I have a job and I'm quoting $20,000, like a few years ago, it'd be like, oh my God, like $20,000? Like what, right. Like who do I think I am? Like whatever. But now it's like, it is a lot of money. I'm not going to be like $20,000 is nothing. It's like, it's a lot of money. It's just the way I think about it is I don't psych myself out with thinking like it's this overwhelming thing. I just think like, it's 20 grand, it affords me to like live for a couple of months. Right. It's like, It's not this like big scary thing that it once was. Yeah. So that's something I've learned and that's kind of like shifted inside of me. I mean, there's so much, just valuing yourself, also learning to like detach from your work, because I think like something that as artists we struggle with it, like if I was a salesperson and I was going to be selling, a car to somebody, it's like, I didn't make the car. I didn't create the car didn't come out of my, anything that has to do with me. I'm just selling this product. Mm-hmm. And so then I can rattle off whatever numbers and I'm not attached to those numbers and my like what I feel like I'm worth is not attached to whether or not the person says yes or no, or whether they say I'm too expensive or not. But as artists, it's like we're creating something that's coming from, our inspiration, and we feel very attached to it. And so then when somebody doesn't like it, or somebody says, you're too expensive or whatever, it's like oftentimes we like take a hit to our soul or whatever. It's like
right.
Who do I think I am,
Right.
And that shifted so much, it's like, the number one reason by far that people do not hire me is because they can't afford me. Like that's by far the number one reason. If people could afford me, I would book every single client that reaches out to me, but I've had to develop being okay with the fact that not everybody can afford me and not everybody needs to be able to afford me, If I make myself so that everybody can afford me, then that becomes detrimental to my own life and my own business. And, I just view it as like, people that want to buy a Tesla go buy a Tesla because they can afford a Tesla. And if you can't afford a Tesla, then you just don't buy a Tesla. You buy something that you can afford, right? I remember one time I had a phone consultation. Somebody flat out asked me, what makes you think you can charge that much? Wow. And I just died on the inside because it's like, what do you say to that? Like, I was like, and also, if I was really, I'm sure at the time I was struggling a little bit more with believing that I could charge that much. So that was sort of confirmation of this belief that already existed inside of myself that I'm trying to overcome. So of course it was like getting punched in the stomach, and it was like, it took my breath away. And I was like, I mean, I think I did handle it well because they ended up hiring me and being really happy with the photo shoot and everything. But amazing. I think I just said like, well, this is just, this is what I believe I'm like, this is just what I do. I mean, I don't know. I was like, I didn't know exactly what to say, but I did it in a way that was, I guess, graceful enough that it didn't, they ended up hiring me. But yeah, I mean, it's like, but that's been something that I've learned throughout the course of having a business. And it's like, it's like, I don't know what to tell. Like, somebody questions why I charge this much, I immediately think of like, if you walk into a Tesla dealership and you question the dealer about why they charge that much, it's like, what are they going to say to you? Like, they're just going to be like, this is what it is. Like, and of course I can say, well, I don't know. I would say like, this is, I'm like, wait, maybe I would not be, but I would say like, like I've been doing this for 12 years. Like at one time I didn't charge this much. And now, 12, 13 years into this, of course I charge more and more. And also, I also chuckled myself a little bit because I'm like, well, it's kind of funny because I'm sure like in the future, I'll be more expensive eventually, because that's what has happened throughout my career.
Right.
And I also surround myself with people who charge either as much as I do or more. I have lots of photographer friends who are making a lot more money than I am, and so I can just say that to you. And like, well, all of my peers, the people that I consider my peers, charge either this much or more. This is just the standard to me, at least. Yeah. So that's another thing that's developed over time, something I've learned and had to work on.
But thank you so much for sharing about that. I think everything that you just shared about, learning about yourself and valuing yourself, I think is so freaking important, especially for even young photographers that are out there listening or watching. It's kind of like you have to be able to value yourself. And especially when you are an expert in your field and you literally have the physical proof of what you're able to create, it's kind of like knowing your value is the most important thing. And don't devalue yourself.
I've had coffee with multiple photographers who reached out to me on social media and just which I do with other people too, where I'm just like, hey, would love to talk shop or whatever. And, which for anybody listening, that's a great thing to do. Like if you, want to learn about something you're unsure of and you like find people who look like they're doing what you want to be doing and then ask if you can like take them to coffee or have a FaceTime call and just pick their brain. And, some people are going to be assholes, but some people will be really gracious and will answer all your questions and be really cool about it. And then you can learn some stuff. But, I've had coffee with multiple people who when they were asking me about like, well, how do you like do this successfully or whatever? And I would ask them like, how much do you charge? And they would tell me, and it's like hardly anything. And then I would just be like, you've got to like, this is what you should be charging. And I've watched 3 or 4 people who were just like, oh, I didn't realize that. And then they just took that information and ran with it and just were like off to the races. Like we're just making a shitload more money, like right off the bat. And they didn't have any like personal blocks, I guess, in the way they were of doing that. They were just like, okay, cool. I'm just going to do it. And immediately doing it. Immediately it was happening, and they were attracting people who could afford it. And, so yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it definitely can be done. Even if you're like listening to this, or you listen to somebody else talking numbers and it just seems like ridiculously out of your like ability to charge X amount of dollars or to ask for that much money or whatever, it's possible to develop the ability to do that, because I at one time thought it was absurd to charge as much as I'm charging today. And now I don't think it's absurd. Now, whenever I get whenever I have to come up with a proposal for something that's out of the ordinary for some job, I will reach out to a couple people that I know who have more experience in that realm, who I know are making good money and charging top dollar. And that's why I reach out to them specifically, and I'll just take their advice. If they're like, hey, like, yeah, I would ask for this much. That's what I'll do. Like, I don't want to go to people who I know are like, undercutting themselves, and like, I'm not interested in that. Now I want to make sure that it's like I've shifted from being concerned that I was going to be asking for too much money to being concerned that I'm going to just undercut myself. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I do want to make as much as I possibly can, There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being really successful at what you do for a living.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of based on what you just shared and sharing with, aspiring photographers or people talking shop, do you kind of have like a mentor or someone that has really helped you and guided you along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I've found like some sort of like educational resources along the way that have been very helpful, especially in the business side of things.
Got it.
So, years ago, I came across Sue Bryce Education. She's that is all about like, how to go from nothing to creating a successful portrait studio, where you're photographing sort of everyday people. Like, what do you charge? How do you price it out? How do you structure it all? Like, there's even a lot of things about like, how do you, take a good photograph of somebody or whatever. So it's like the thing that I found the most helpful though for me personally was the business side of things. And they also are big on like self-value as well. So there's some really, really good talks and things on that. So I found that to be helpful. My friend Felix Kuntz, who, when I said I did a workshop, I actually took his workshop, and then we become friends over the years. And,
amazing.
He's got some really great, lighting courses that you can purchase online. That are, I mean, the thing too that I've realized over the years is like, there's all these like resources and YouTube videos and whatever out there in terms of like how to learn how to do all the different aspects of photography. And I gravitate towards the people who are doing something that I like. Like I liked Felix's work to begin with. So I wanted to learn from him because I wanted, like, if there's so many people out there who are just creating work that I don't really like, so they're not going to be the people that I'm going to look to learn lighting or to learn whatever, it's like that type of thing. So I would say if you find people who are doing something in the realm of what you actually already are drawn to, that's when it can be really powerful, because then you can directly apply those things to your own work. There's Facebook groups I've become a part of that are just like like business kind of photography Facebook groups. Super helpful because people are really, really nice in the groups, and people are just talking numbers and they're like not afraid to say the numbers, say what they're charging, to say, that's powerful to find a group of people who are really openly talking about the numbers of things. And also sharing the wins, like sharing, like, hey, I just made a $10,000 sale. And it's inspiring to see other people doing something that you want to be doing or that you one day see yourself doing, and I think it's really important to surround yourself with that. So, that's been hugely helpful as well.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. I think the community is so necessary, in this industry because
and I think also
it doesn't feel like it's that big.
Yeah. It's also, I think, really important to diversify, like to not pigeonhole yourself into only looking to like one resource for all of your information. Like it's really great to just like, even when I'm looking at people's work, like there are lots of different photographers that I feel inspired by. And rather than just like one photographer that I'm looking to as like the end all be all of like, because then if that was the case, then I feel like what I would end up creating would probably end up looking very similar to that, and I don't want that to happen. So I want to be inspired by multiple different things. And there's similarities in what I'm inspired by for sure, but there's different individual, like unique voices through the work of different people. And it's the same way with like business because, like I've always been in this place where it's like, I have this portrait studio. I photograph a lot of like everyday people for all different kinds of purposes. And then I also have always had goals to do other things, like to do, editorial portraiture, to do commercial portraiture, to,
right.
So some of these resources, they don't cover that side of things. So I've looked to, sometimes it's just finding like a podcast interview that some photographer who's already doing that has done. And they're talking about a whole other world of photography that I'm not getting over here, So, again, if you kind of like just diversify and find like, even if you just find a photographer whose work you really love and then go searching to see if they've done interviews, if they've done podcasts, if they've, done behind the scenes stuff. So you can kind of pick their brain a little bit that way, that can be powerful.
So kind of to that point, who do you consider to be kind of your number one fan or biggest support through your career thus far?
I mean, it's really just been all my closest friends have been my biggest support. I'm going through a breakup right now, but my partner of 4 years was, massive support in this area of career. And, I've luckily always attracted people into my life, in my adult life, who seem to see, or this is what they mirror back to me. Like they see a greater potential in me than I see in myself. And that's a powerful thing to be reminded of constantly. And, so I would say all of my closest friends really have been my biggest support, cause they're the people I can share with that I'm feeling ashamed or that I'm feeling scared or I'm stressing out or, and then they'll be like, okay, if you saw what I see, if you like, you wouldn't be stressing out about this. Like, they're like, I see somebody who is fully capable of doing this and so much more, and, and of course, like, over time, it's like as I work on myself, it's like I start to see more of that in myself too. Right. But I mean, I think those are the kind of people you want to actually have in your life, like I would say ideally everybody that you're choosing to have close to you is your biggest support system. Hopefully you're doing that for each other. You're like encouraging, supporting each other in whatever the journey is. Yeah.
Otherwise find new friends. No, I'm just kidding. Totally joking.
I mean, yeah.
You're like, see ya.
But that's true. I mean, if you're hanging out with somebody who is projecting their fear and stuff onto you around, their limiting beliefs. And so when you're saying like, hey, I'm scared about, I'm scared about this new job I have. And they're like, well, are you sure you can do it? Because, like that type of thing. It's like, yeah, like maybe you do want to get new friends, because
yeah.
that's not a great, like, it's not great energy to be around. Like, I really do believe in the thing that you want. Only people who are going to support you being the best version of yourself that you can be. Always.
Yeah.
And people who
Absolutely.
are just, more successful than you are, who inspire you, to be better.
Yeah. Fantastic. So kind of looking to the future, what are some goals that you have for your career, let's say in like the next 3 to 5 years or even 10 years from now?
So one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is I really want to focus my energy on, the like art world of photography, the, like the fine art kind of world, which ties into self-portrait work and like, selling my work as like limited edition, pieces, which I have already been doing, but not to the level that I want to.
Got it.
And, and I don't know what that will look like, like, I don't know if that looks like me doing it completely independently or if that means me doing it through galleries. But another thing I've learned is to like, when you have a goal in mind, like put it out to the universe on a regular basis that this is what you want and imagine it happening already. But you've got to be open to the avenue with which you're going to get there. Could be literally anything, it could be, there could be something that's going to show up in your life that is completely outside of anything you could have ever imagined that will be
right.
the stepping stone to that goal. And so it's so important to like open up your mind to, or really to like just not worry about how you're going to get to that goal. Because I really think that then the universe brings things into your experience naturally that will help you in that way. And if you're really present and just like paying attention, then the things start to show up that, become like little sort of like cues and guides that get you there. So that's one thing. I mean, I always have like money goals, just, making more money than I am now. I would love to do, more like celebrity portraiture, and actually be in more publications.
Have you considered making a book of some of the work that you've done?
Yes. So without saying too much about that yet, years ago, so I haven't done this in a couple of years, but I used to always have a list of goals. And every morning I would actually like read the goals out loud. My therapist, she said a great way to do it is to think like, who do I want to be? What do I want to feel? And what do I want to have? And like answer those questions and like come up with all the goals. And, so like one thing I wrote down is like, I'm only surrounded by people who want to see me, I'm only surrounded by people who want to, see me be the best version of myself or want to support me in being the best version of myself. Stuff like that. Or like, I am only attracting clients who value what I do enough to actually pay what I'm charging. Stuff like that, like really specific. Yeah. And but also there was like money stuff. And there was also, one of the things was having like a coffee table book published. And so for the last, since before the pandemic, that's been actually in the works.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, there will be eventually like, an official announcement of what that is and everything. But yes, so that is something that I have thought of and wanted, and it is happening. So sometime hopefully in the near future, that will be like an actual tangible thing.
Amazing. I'm excited to see when that comes out then, the big announcement. So my question I always pose, and it kind of throws people off, but, if you were able to talk to your future self 15 years from now, what would you say to your future self?
I would probably want to ask my future self a bunch of questions, because when I envision my future self, I've always envisioned, like when I envisioned the older version of myself, which there was a period of time when I was like, the older version of myself is like 45 years old. And now I'm like, okay, I'm quickly becoming the older version of myself. So now I'm like the older version of myself is 50. I don't know, but like, but I've always had a very sort of specific vision, which is somebody who has sort of come out on the other side of a lot of the things that I've struggled with, and who has a very strong sense of self and confidence and belief in my ability to do things, who is very successful in my life, who has achieved a lot of my goals. And so I would really just want to like ask that person a bunch of questions to see what I could learn that could help me now currently to kind of like, you know, chill the F out a little bit more and, and, be able to maybe even get there a little quicker or something.
I like that. Very cool. So do you have kind of a motto or a phrase that you live by?
I don't know. I mean, I'm having a hard time coming up with just one. I can tell you my favorite quote.
Sure. I love that.
That, it's by, I might be butchering the name, but Pema Chodron. That might not be the right way of pronouncing it because I don't know that I've ever said the name out loud. But just, you know, when you just like look at somebody's name in writing, you make it up in your head, and then you realize that it's like you're actually pronouncing it wrong. So there's this quote that they have that it's part of a bigger quote, but it's something along the lines of compassion is not a relationship between the wounded and the healer. It is a relationship between equals. For only after you know your own darkness fully can you be, for only after you know your own darkness well can you be fully present with the darkness of another.
Wow.
Yeah, that gets me every time. But that, I mean, that goes back to everything we've been talking about. You know, like I really believe that, like if you want to be a good photographer, a good portrait photographer, like you got to invest in working on yourself, like working on your personal shit, you know, like, but I think it's that way, you know, I think that's also just life in general. You know, if you want to achieve big things in your life, you kind of have to be willing to face your own pain, your own trauma. Like, I feel like there's a point in everybody's life, probably, unless you just choose to not take this path, but, where part of the path is to really face your pain and to sit with it and to be present with it and to, like I have a spiritual friend, guided friend person who he says, you know, inside of everybody is a well of sorrow. And at some point, we need to drain the well of sorrow. We have to be present with it. We have to feel it. We have to experience it, and we have to integrate it. And through that process of having that experience with ourselves, we develop compassion for ourselves. We develop love for ourselves, empathy. And then, you know, through that work, we're able to connect so much more deeply with the world around us and with people around us and our clients and our friends and relationships. And yeah, I mean, it would be great if there was another way, but I really think that like there's a book of like within the last year that, somebody turned me on to that called The Presence Process, by Michael Brown. Again, one up there with like life-changing things I've done, but this book is just all based on the premise that you, twice a day, I can't remember how long it is. It's a 10-week thing, and each chapter kind of like takes you through like just sort of this beautiful, like simple understanding of how this all works. But it's based on the idea that we all are just existing in this space with a lot of unresolved stuff inside of our body, a lot of unresolved emotion, which is really just energy. And, when you sit quietly with yourself, you know, some people just call it meditation. But just sitting quietly, like the book says, if you do it twice a day, if you just follow along with the process, that these emotions naturally want to be integrated into our present experience. And so when you remove all the distractions, then these things naturally start to come up, which, I mean, I understand why a lot of people don't want to do that, because the stuff that comes up is painful, you know, and there's a lot of crying, at least for me personally. there's just a lot of processing through stuff that's really painful stuff to process through. But it's like on the other side of it, you feel like cleansed every time, and you feel like a new person, and you feel like it's such a powerful thing to do, you know? And again, you know, that's the process of connecting to yourself and then being able to connect to the world around us on a deeper level.
Amazing. Very well said. Awesome. Well, that's actually it. So, the last thing I just want to ask is kind of, for any listeners and people watching, where can they follow you, as well as see your work? Of course, I'll include all the links and everything below, but just for everyone to kind of listen to and go and follow and check your work out.
Sure. So it's, my Instagram, Facebook, and one of my websites is just aaronjyoung.com. The J in my name is my middle name, Jay, spelled out. So, and then I have, a studio website that is aaronjyoungstudio.com. So that's pretty much it.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps it up. So thank you so much, Aaron, for joining me here on this podcast episode. And I really look forward to seeing everything else that you are going to create in the next coming years. I'll definitely keep an eye out for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for having me. It's always fun to do this type of stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much to Aaron J. Young for an amazing interview and sharing so much of his own personal experience with us. This week's Buddhist quote of the day is, "To strive even higher, to do even better, the creative process is a desperate struggle to go beyond what we were yesterday. It is a battle against resting on our laurels, against the fear of losing what we have. It is an adventure into unknown territory," by Daisaku Ikeda. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Go ahead and give us a like and a review on Apple Podcasts, if you will. And if you're watching here on YouTube, go ahead and give us that thumbs up. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you go ahead and press that ding bell button, you can go ahead and get notifications when a new episode has been released. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Let's talk creative on the next episode of the Creative Lotus Podcast. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Creative Lotus Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Zaki. Please go ahead and subscribe, rate us, and write a review, and follow me at Alan Zaki on social media. I look forward to having more amazing creative dialogues on the next episode.